Welcome back to the Good Life podcast. It's been a little while. I'm here with John, Wes, and our guest, Manny. What is your last name, Manny?
Escamilla.
Escamilla, all right.
Yeah.
Manny, so I just met Manny. Did you know him before or no?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
When he was younger, though, like a teenager.
All right, I just met Manny because we all went on some hike like a week ago or something like that, and he was one of our car mates on the way up there. And
we got tricked into a 6-mile hike, but turned into like a little more than 11.
Yeah, never again. Never again.
What did you think it was going to be when we were driving? Did you expect it to be that hard? Because I didn't.
No, I expected to be home by noon, honestly.
That's what I told everyone. I'll be home at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, 3 miles, and didn't get home till 5 or 6, so.
Wes missed out on a crazy spiritual venture.
I was like, hey, guys, sorry, I'm busy.
Bro, we saw snakes and snakes talking to us on the trail. It was wild.
And somebody literally almost died as well on the trail.
That's true. Though, okay, so we won't talk about the hike the whole time, guys, but literally, like, I'm going to say a quarter of the group ended up having to fall back for at least an hour because someone's ankle swelled up. And this was like actually not a really like just, walk through the park type of hike. This is, you got to climb, you got to move around. So we basically, like the athletes, we were sprinted through this thing. And then the rest of the group, we had to wait for it because, people were dying. So
we survived.
What was the literally someone almost died? I didn't get that one.
No, I don't know. I was just being dramatic for the sake of it. But
putting some sauce on it.
Hey, it's a podcast. We gotta keep them entertained, right?
It's because Manny's so used to watching CNN. He's like, this is how we explain stories here.
It's all fake news over here.
I'm kidding, bro. So that's kind of like, that was my introduction to you, Manny. It was when we were in the car talking
I think I
about
met Manny when he was like about 14, 15, and then maybe 17. But then I didn't see him for like 10 years.
Had a little detour with things, but I do remember Johnny. Johnny was always the cool guy who could break your arm if you ever get close to him, look at him wrong. So I do remember Johnny, great guy. Him and my cousin are good friends. So
all three of those.
All three, pretty much my whole family. Yeah. But no, Johnny's always been around and someone I looked up to.
So let's hear your story, Manny, because I know you have an interesting one. So take us back however far you want to. Hopefully it's really far back because it's really an amazing story.
No, thanks. First of all glory and honor to God for really being there for me. I was born to a single mom. She struggled with drugs. We lived in Sacramento until I was like 13, 14, and just moving from place to place. And, she was trying to find herself while also taking care of me. So it was just, it was a lot. But thankfully we were able to come into Modesto. She wanted to be closer to her parents. So with that came being closer to my family, and wasn't raised in church, never went to church, but had a part of my family that did. And, as a kid, I played sports, liked to play baseball. And one of my cousins, Victor Espinoza, he kind of took me under his wing. I never met my father, couldn't tell you how he looked. But Victor really played that father figure role for me. So from there was introduced to God through him. I joke with him that I tell him, probably the only reason why he took me to church was to be a chaperone for his now wife. But nonetheless, he brought me to church, so kind of just was following his lead. And when I got older, like in high school, I fell away, was trying to do things on my own. I was trying to figure out life on my own, but found my way back. In that time when I was away, I moved back with my mom, and we lived here in Modesto. Lived in South Modesto on Olivero Road, which is right off of Crow's Landing. And in 2012, the Modesto Bee called it the Devil Street. So it supposedly was the worst street in Modesto. I have the newspaper proudly hung up on my wall, but supposedly nothing good was supposed to come from there. And I took the bus every day to MJC, and all that to say, God was really faithful to me. That time I really came into my own faith-wise.
Education.
Yeah.
So did your mom push education, or was that just ingrained in you? How did that happen?
Funny story. So when I graduated high school, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Moved to Santa Cruz, thought I was going to try to make it out there. It didn't work out, so I needed a job. And I worked at a warehouse. I worked at a company called Fastenal. And I worked there for about a year. And that made me go to school. It's like, I'm never like working hard. I had to wear a back brace when I was like 19. I had to wear one. So I was like, man, I'm working too hard for this money right here. So that really like kind of gave me a glimpse, like it's either that or I could probably do well in school and maybe work like sitting down, not having to like break my back. So thankfully I learned that lesson really early on. I was like 21 and started going to MJC, and then from there went to UC Berkeley, and then from UC Berkeley was able to go to Harvard.
So did you have good grades to go to Berkeley, or how did?
Yeah, so what happened was, in high school I was always like a decent student. I was never like a blow your hair back student, right? I was like a decent student, nothing really special. But when I quit working the warehouse job, I was like, all right, like I kind of have to put all my eggs in this basket. And mind you, when I was at MJC, I didn't finish. I went to school for 2 semesters, and I withdrew from all 8 of my courses. I didn't even finish a course, so I couldn't get financial aid. I couldn't afford the books, so I literally had to stay in the library to borrow the books from the library. So that it like forced me to study. So it was just like all of those things for me were God ordained, because I would have never known that's how I would learn how to study, being broke and having to be at the library to borrow books. So for me, I'm grateful to God because I could just see, Wes, you and I talked a little bit off camera. I'm sure you could relate to this, that we can see how God somehow was just in the mix, kind of orchestrating things behind the scenes. And I'm grateful that, I have that testimony. And for me, it's, it's for God's glory, and anything that he does from here on out is for him. But yeah, it's been a crazy journey, and it feels like it's just getting started. But
so you landed in Berkeley, and then you said Berkeley to Harvard. That's a pretty big jump.
To Harvard,
right
big jump. Big
I've
jump.
never heard of it. I've never heard of that.
No. So when I was at MJC, I always loved business and economics. And I remember at the time I was going to church. I was going to church in South Modesto and trying to like really get involved heavily, because I knew, hey, if it ain't church, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? And I was struggling on the side too. So I was like, all right, I need to be all in on the church thing. So for me, it was like, all right, God, like I can study religion or I could study business. And I told him, I said, hey, if I study religion, just promise me that you will like make it all work out. Like, please don't leave me hung out to dry. Yeah. At that time, I thought maybe I'll be a pastor or something. So studied religion and kind of just went all in on it and said, all right, Lord.
From Berkeley?
From at MJC, I was majoring in like philosophy, and then Berkeley, I majored in religious studies with a concentration in Christianity. And then when I transferred to Harvard, I got a degree in divinity. So for me, it was just, Lord, like if I have control over the decision-making process of my life, I'm gonna mess it up. So just promise me that like it all will pan out. And so far it has, and I'm willing to continue betting on God.
Let's kind of go back real fast. So at the age of 10, 12, 13, was it rough? Like in Sacramento? Like was it?
Yeah, what part of Sacramento were you in?
Yeah, so I grew up in Oak Park, so South Sac, then moved to North Highlands. So we were bouncing around North Highlands.
North Highlands is like the bad part, right? That's like, or at least now it is.
Yeah, so I haven't been back in like 10 years, but I know back then Oak Park was kind of the rough area. Okay. I lived right under the, like right by the freeway where Gunther's is at. If you're familiar with Sacramento, you'll know where Gunther's is, and there's like the freeway, and the other side of Gunther's was always really rough. So my mom lived there with some friends, and like I said, my mom was trying to take care of somebody while trying to take care of herself. She's a strong woman. I mean, she made a lot of mistakes, but she she was able to protect me. Never did I ever have to sleep outside. there was always food to eat, so she always made it happen. I don't want to know the things she had to do to make it happen, but she made it happen, right? So, but yeah, it was rough, but really, I thank God for that, because it really provided like some grit.
Right.
I was able to learn resilience at a young age, be creative, kind of improvise, not take myself too seriously, like not walk around like with my nose in the air, like just really be humble, because I seen that side, and I seen how good people in that world are. Like, I think a lot of times from the outside looking in, we can judge people that are like on drugs, or, they're streetwalkers, they're drug dealers. But you really see like, hey man, these people, they really got a good side if you give them time to show it. So I'm really happy I seen that part of that side of life, even though there was a lot of hardships. I wouldn't take it back.
So I'm sure at 12, 13, you didn't see yourself graduating from Harvard with a master's?
I couldn't even tell you where Harvard was. But no, not at all. Not at all.
That's all God, right?
Yeah,
there.
all God. Yeah, all God. It's funny, because even I think in high school, I didn't even know where Berkeley or Harvard were. I don't even think, as a kid, my mom always said, hey, you got to go to college, but she never knew what that meant, because she never went to college. So she was just like, because college is like this obscure thing in the future that you got to find a way to get to. So, that's why I really believe in Psalms, like when David says that God's a father to the fatherless. I never met my dad, but he's always provided strong women around me to really provide for me. But also, he really made up that other part, when things could have gone bad, when things could have gone left. Me and my mom were always protected and whatnot. So, yeah, God is real. Like, there's no doubt in my mind, for sure.
So, okay, you obviously went to some great colleges. Wes, did you go to school?
Junior college.
Same
AA.
here. Same here.
AA.
I didn't get my AA, but same here. John, you have your degree. You have a couple degrees, right?
Yeah, they don't matter for me.
No. What I wanted to kind of go and ask you, Manny, because I think all of us can see this a little bit. I don't want to talk about bias on university, but do you feel like there's whether it's at Harvard, Berkeley, and maybe you see this across the board with other friends that went to other universities, do you feel like there's a lack of diversity and thought in some regards, certain areas?
So I think that's like really common, or that's like a common or a more popular talking point right now.
Yeah.
Is, that there's a liberal bias in colleges. Having gone through these institutions, I could tell you there's highly conservative professors at these colleges. Yes, there are very biased professors in these colleges as well. But you get I truly believe, having studied at Berkeley, which is considered like probably around the world as the most liberal institution in the world, right? That if anybody's going to be trying to knock down the door of the White House, it's going to be a Berkeley graduate, right? But I could be honest in saying, from my perspective, that I don't really agree with that talking point. I personally think that, for me, if there is a bias, a college isn't gonna back an entire bias. Because the professors are the experts. The professors are the ones who are writing articles. So for a school to select only professors that think one certain way, you're kneecapping your talent teaching wise, and you're also turning off really talented students from attending. So, I don't buy, I personally, my experience doesn't speak to that. I know you also hear that there's these perspectives that, there's like a communist or left,
at least in the humanities, right?
Yeah,
That's what
conspiracy, if that's the case, what's easier to believe, that there's like this underground hidden force that is trying to liberalize America's youth, or if it's just a call for us to take certain perspectives more serious than we did in decades past, right? That, if these thoughts are still percolating in the consciousness of society, then maybe we should be, inquisitive enough to consider, or be open-minded enough to like hear it out. But no, all that to say, I don't think that there is like this hidden force that's liberalizing America's youth and colleges.
Do you think that there's a correlation between, because obviously people our age, because we're like around the same age, right? Give or take a year and a half or two.
How old are you?
31.
I'm just kidding.
31. I'm 31.
I'm not going to say how old I am, but
I remember you told me in the van, though. I do remember.
I'm close.
I know. It's that big deal.
Yeah.
The
I'm
dirty
getting
30.
afraid. No, actually, I'm turning 30 this month, so,
Oh,
so
my
I'm
goodness.
so I'm scared.
It's the beginning,
all
bro.
this, and you're 29.
Yeah, I'm
Wow.
scared.
Savage.
I'm scared
Wow.
a little bit.
What I was going to ask is, okay, obviously people our age have a really loud digital footprint online, right?
Yeah.
So there's no denying that majority of people in our generation have a particular perspective politically, right?
Yeah.
Even socially. We don't even say politically, just socially. Do you think that there's any correlation between university and that, or do you think that is something that it's just a cycle that everyone kind of goes through, and as you get older, you slightly end up getting a little bit less lopsided?
I love to hear Johnny and Wes's perspective because they're a little older than us. But what I'll say, I feel like what I'm getting from what you're saying is like that people our age are leaning left a lot more than in years past, or it's becoming more apparent. And the one commonality behind that is that a higher degree of education. From my perspective, I really think that it's people our age realizing that, the American dream is not as accessible to us as it was in years past or in generations past. In past generations, you work hard, you go to college, you have a family, you can buy a home, you can retire, you're good. People my age have gone through 3 recessions.
Yeah. Well, really 2. The third one was when we were kids, right?
Yeah,
But,
third one when we were kids. Unemployment's been, over 7% for the majority of our almost 10% for the majority of our lives. Crazy.
And they spoon-fed us debt. They spoon-fed us
right?
debt. Yeah.
So I don't think that this liberal leaning is because of college. I think it's because the route that has been told to us from a young age to follow is failing. And people our age are pointing as capitalism as being that generator or that engine that's causing us to not have opportunity, I think that's more of the issue for people my age. And that's why we're prone more to considering that's why people believe that people my age are more prone to being socialist, because people our age have not reaped the benefits that a capitalist society has promised, whereas generations past, they reap the benefits. So I think that's where it is. But I love to defer to people who are older who have maybe a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Here's what I think. When I was younger, it was very idealistic. I was very set on fire about the world and what I considered was possible. Obviously, when you become a young adult, you see the world as it is for the first time, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. And you realize that you have a capacity to affect that. When I was younger, I thought that capacity was a whole lot larger than it actually is. My sphere of influence now, I realize, is a lot smaller. And it's somewhat disheartening in a way, and I think an almost dangerous feeling like maybe that fire is being snuffed out. But in a way, it also feels like it's not. It feels like it's more precise, more directed. Yeah. Where the desire to change something still exists, but the knowledge that in actuality, what can I affect is really what's right in front of me. And so that kind of mindset and process has transitioned me from kind of a left-leaning liberal approach to all things to a more conservative, directed approach.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
What do you think, John?
Well, it's very hard because I grew up really conservative. I was indoctrinated really young I would go to work with my uncle at like 9, 10 years old, and all he listened to was Rush Limbaugh. So I was a ditto head since
Tony?
like I was
Okay.
since I was like 10.
Rush.
So it's very hard.
Is he still around?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Put some respect on that. Anyways, but I get your point, because at 28, 29, I didn't have nothing. And what I would like to know is at what age, because there's a lot of people that are Democrats at a younger age, and then they end up jumping to the other side of the aisle at an older age.
Yeah.
And so at 28, 29, I didn't have nothing.
Yeah.
I had a car, and I had barely started working. Not even finished with my degree. But as I got older, you know, I've been at my same job now, or teaching, for the last 14 years.
Which is huge.
Yeah, and so my wife, you know, she's been a nurse for the last 15 years. So at 28, 29, we didn't have nothing. We bought our first house at 30, 31, or 30. Now we have a couple homes.
Yeah.
We're doing okay. And I could see the benefit of capitalism at age 30-something, 40, where maybe you, or maybe people that are younger, or even me at that age, I'm like, hey, when's it going to happen for me?
Yeah.
I didn't see it at that age. It took me until my mid 30s, early 40s to actually like, oh, okay, this is what it is. But that came with a lot of hard work and a lot of time.
Yeah.
It took time for me. But I know what you're saying too, because our parents, or not my parents, but some parents, you know, they would go to school, graduate, they're already jumping in their jobs, and, you know, 50 something, they're ready to retire, where that's not the case for me.
No, not at all.
Do you think that, because you had mentioned earlier that when I brought up the university conversation, you had said that, because it is definitely like a popular speaking point, right? That's what everyone brings that up. And you were kind of reverse engineering it back to a little bit deeper than that, right? There's more of a process. That's not just the root of it. But, and it is a little bit of a fallacy. It turns into like a circular argument. But do you think that some of these young people our age kind of revolting against capitalism is a bit of a circular, like that turns into, like, that's a speaking point as well?
Yeah. You know, I think to answer that question, we have to like touch on things that Wes and Johnny said, right? Like Wes, and please correct me if I heard you wrong, like Wes said that he realized that the idealism of transforming the world was really kind of really morphed into a reality that I could only influence my sphere, right? And because of that, there was a transition to becoming more conservative. And then with Johnny, it was once you gained assets that you realized the importance of conservatism. Am I right? Like once you bought a house and started making money, you
then it's like, oh, now I'm being taxed this much.
Yeah.
I don't like that. You know?
Exactly. So, you know, so for Johnny, it was income and assets. And for Wes, it was this idealism that really was transformed. You know, again, can we argue that it's a circular reasoning from young people? I guess so. You know, yeah, I guess you can say that some of it is circular reasoning because we don't want something anymore because it doesn't benefit us, so it must be bad. And then everything that points back to what we don't want is automatically bad. Like, yeah, you know what, could be true. But for me, in hearing these responses, it's, you know, what was the influence of these perspectives changing for Johnny and Wes? I'm not saying that I agree with this, but from a younger person's perspective, it was this capitalistic ideal, assets and income. And for Wes, it was this ideal that, you know, for me to really make a difference, I can't go out and change the world. I have to make a life for myself close by because I have to pay bills. I have to take care of a family. I have to take care of myself. I have to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That is the issue, right? That's the issue that that are my age and younger, I think, have is that why is my life being determined by income, by assets, by the intelligence that I have that needs to be turned into value?
A commodity, basically.
Yeah, that's the issue. It's like life is more than that. And I think that's like their biggest issue is like my life should not be determined on that. That's why we see generations that are older than me and you, Devin, you know, they bought material items. You know, you go to your grandma's house, she has every
knickknacks and everything.
She has
on the wall.
everything,
Yeah.
like every pot you could imagine. She has so many things. Whereas people my age, they go on trips. They want to experience things. So for me, I can't say I agree with that, but I think that's like the rationale. And I don't think that's circular reasoning. I think that's a very like reflective point from people my age. I don't know. I'd love to hear what y'all think, because it sounds like y'all are a little different.
So no, I want to piggyback off that and kind of move into a little bit more of like the conversation of like whether there's a lack of diversity or not a lack of diversity. On the spiritual side of things.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a lack of diversity because I have a lot of friends that went to school, and this is anecdotal, obviously, because I have no data behind this, but I do have a lot of friends that came away from university, majority of them, not believing anymore. Now, they're whatever they were rooted in regards to their faith could have been, I don't know. It is what it is. I have no idea what they thought before, but I do know that they walked away without it. So do you feel like there is some catalyst there that is just triggering a lot of people who didn't necessarily go to school for something like studying like biblically?
Yeah. I know, like I told my friend who, you know, he's going to Yale right now. And I said,
Wow,
you
got
know,
a friend that's going to Yale. I don't have any. Like,
This guy's a Mason. He's in the Masons.
he's joining the Skull and Bones saga. But, you know, like I told him,
like,
you know,
well, my friend, he goes to University of Phoenix.
My friend.
if you go to
HVAC,
University of
baby.
Phoenix, you know, there's no hate on it. But, you know,
Just had to throw that out there,
like,
man.
like I say that because like, you know, I told them, you know, there's a graveyard of people that walked into that institution on the first day, strong Christians, and they left not believing anymore.
I could speak to that too, because even at a JC, I took biology, and I'm like, oh man, I got it wrong. No, just learning regular biology, and if your faith isn't grounded in actually what you believe, and if you don't know more than what you were taught, and if you didn't study for yourself, then you're in trouble.
100%.
You're in trouble.
100%. You know, quick little story. You know, so I wasn't born in church, but I started going to a relatively conservative church, and I went to school at a young age. And what I've realized was that, you know, if a certain belief system and lifestyle in the church is your understanding of the world, you are going to have a huge,
That's a good point.
huge challenge. And from my perspective is if you can make it past that challenge, your faith is battle tested. That's why I have issues with people, you know, religious leaders who are so against education, because that's like a proving ground. That's a giant that people who are going to school have to slay. Your faith is tested, and it's grown, and if it can survive, then there really is nothing intellectually or mentally that could come against it. You know, it's all about making meaning. Things aren't going to make sense, but you have to make a decision that I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to make meaning of these things not making sense, and have faith enough to believe, even though I don't understand God, it's going to make sense eventually, right?
Do you see that with your son at all? Do you feel like, I don't know how much connection you have with his friends or anything like that, but how old is he? 14?
14. I see him questioning his faith big time right now. Yeah. Every time we get together, he's challenging me on something. I don't even have to bring it up. And he's, well, Dad, what if this is like this, then what about this? And
Can
he
you
thinks
remember any question?
Not off the top of my head, but it's constant now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it starts young, even younger than the college arena. society is pressing it. But I agree with you. A faith that's not tested is not even worth having. If it can't withstand the big questions of life, then it's better gone. Honestly, if it doesn't survive, then so be it.
Well, it's kind of like non-existent, right? Like what data point of reference would you have for your faith if it was not tested? Like you need something to bounce it off of, right? It doesn't just exist on its own. There always needs to be some binary for it, right? I would assume.
I agree.
I think some people don't need an intellectual explanation for their faith. I think others do.
Yeah. So John and I were talking about this earlier because I was we're having a conversation about repentance, and like that literally means to like turn towards God. Because if you, like, so I won't try to explain it, but if you were to just try to explain like
that's
faith,
my first sermon.
I'm like,
right now.
No, but so if you were to try to explain,
Like, well,
faith,
no.
I just start standing up.
Clapping.
So we were talking about faith, and we're talking about Jesus walking on water with Peter and everything like that, and but we were talking about faith, and we're like, man, you can't even really like explain faith on its own. Like if someone were to ask you, what is your faith? You'd be like, well, it's me maybe choosing to believe. Like, I don't know. It could be a million different things. You know what I mean? So when I thought of it, I was thinking of like repentance, because it literally means to turn towards God. So anytime that you look at God, or whether you are like halfway believing or full on believing, as long as you're looking for him, I feel like that's the ultimate, like one of the ultimate signs of faith. But other than that, like if you don't have a reference point, like, or anything to like test it, I kind of feel like, how would faith even exist? Kind of like, could bad exist without good? Like, I don't think so. You need something to bounce it off to have the other.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, you know, I think my hope is that we recognize that we're stronger than we think. Like we go in to these institutions, or, you know, I don't have any children, but, you know, seeing some of my other friends who have come from conservative backgrounds who go to these institutions, there's like a fear that they're going to lose their faith. And, you know, I think we should understand that we're stronger than we think we are. We can make it through. And in addition to that, like the benefit to the body of Christ, like there's this beautiful saying that I live by, and it's like the power of exposure, right? It prevents you from making bad decisions because you know what's really available to you. And it also breaks you out of like this prison of being bound by about what others say you should look like, think like, dress like, act like. You know, before going to college, I didn't know what investment banking was. I didn't know what, you know, social work was. Brunch. I didn't know what mimosas were either. Right? I didn't know what any of these things were. But I was exposed to them. I did not drink mimosas, but I found out what they were. So I was exposed to an entirely different world, and now I'm equipped to bring that into the body of Christ so that the church can be more effective. So there's like a blessing, and that's like the blessing that comes after the challenge.
Yeah. I think too is we do a disservice to members, especially the younger generation, is they're not exposed to nothing. And so they grow up going to this one church all their life, and their worldview is really small, especially when every Friday they're just hanging out with the same kids at church. You know, there's no push for athletics or other things in education, and they're just caught in this bubble. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like the Amish people. It's like, let the Amish people get out and go to college, and then it's life-changing, you know? Yeah. And even in the Amish, don't they give them like a year?
Yeah, I watched a TV show on that. Have you ever seen that show?
They give them 1 year to test their faith.
Oh.
And then if they want to come back, they could come back. If not, it's like, well, maybe, you know, this is not your place.
That's good.
And a lot of them, they'll go back. Most of them go back.
Yeah, that's good.
Like half of them get like wild, and then they come back. But then the other ones, they don't even really get that. Like they go out and they just do typical things, like go see a movie, like hang out at like a club and dance. But they're not even. Some of them don't even drink. They're, you know what I mean?
But I think, especially my generation and maybe a little bit younger, is I wasn't really necessarily like that. I had a parents that let me play sports and kind of hang out with my buddies, but they're just the worldview is very small.
I agree with that 100%.
There was that pause right there, everybody. I know we were all volleyballing it up to each other, like who's gonna catch it? What do you? So, what I want, because you go to an apostolic church, yeah?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So, but I don't know if I'm gonna get you in trouble for this. Do you identify as apostolic? I'm just putting you on the spot.
You know, I do. I do identify as apostolic. To elaborate, I guess, you know,
if you guys couldn't tell,
yeah,
if you guys aren't watching it, I just gave Manny the look,
you know,
go ahead, man, go in.
So I wasn't I tell God.
We can edit stuff too, man.
No, I'm an open, when it comes to these things, I'm an open book. You know, I didn't ask God to be apostolic. Lord knows if I had my choice, I would have chosen different churches, maybe, I don't know, but for me, it's like, God, you put me here. So until you tell me otherwise, I'm going to try to make meaning of being in this denomination, right? But yeah, I do consider myself apostolic. And I'm always grateful for them because that's how I learned about God. I learned about God through an apostolic church.
It's like a table with balance, right? Like you might not be like, whenever I ask people this now, I always think about them like whatever they give me, I'm saying maybe they're like 80 or 90% that. Like if they're like, I'm a Baptist, I'm like, okay, so you're like 90% Baptist. There's probably stuff you don't agree with, which I'm not asking you that right now at all. But at least that's what it seems like whenever I ask people, because the same response I got from you, just with insert a different denomination, it's the same response I get from everywhere. They're like, I'm pretty much this, you know what I mean? Is that kind of like?
You know, I think everything's just so fluid now, right? Like I am an apostolic who listens to non-denominational preachers on YouTube. I'm an apostolic who listens to music that isn't apostolic, right? That probably is sung by a Trinitarian. So everything is just so blended, right? That, you know, I think this one strong apostolic identity is being challenged because there's just a lot more spiritual tools for people to reach out to that matches their style of their walk with God. Like I love rap music, R&B, and EDM. There's no apostolic.
Let's just finish this.
No, there's no apostolic who's making that.
He probably
type of
likes
music.
new rap. He's not even classic.
I trust me. What
are those guys like? Littles.
Oh,
the
dude.
Littles, the
I know all of them,
rappers,
bro. Give me the
rappers.
most gutter rap. I listen to it after church and repent when I get home. I'm like, God, I'm sorry. I'll listen to Travis Scott.
Same. You know, I'm guilty as charged. But you know, we can't help that God made us unique, right? And we have different preferences that we like. You know, somebody likes bluegrass. You know, there is an apostolic singer singing these things. There isn't a preacher who is preaching a certain preference I have. But the convictions, just because we have different preferences, the convictions are what is connected to that identity more so than what preacher I'm listening to or what music I'm listening to. That's all Christian, but yeah.
What do you feel? What do you identify as, Wes? If you even identify, because for me, I'm like, I don't even know. But
I'm Catholic.
Okay.
I'm Catholic. Yeah. I mean, it was as an adult. I was baptized in a Baptist church at 8 years old. I attended non-denominational churches sporadically throughout high school, just trying to hang out with girls. And then when I was 20 years old, when I had a true conversion, I ended up in the Catholic Church, and I was confirmed in the year 2000. But even since then, you know, I attend this church regularly, and I identify a lot with what's going on here and with the Spirit. And I've questioned and testing my own belief systems actively. But if I had to say, I'm going to say Catholic because
I think
that's where God called me.
Yeah.
Just like He called you in a particular place, and that's where I encountered Christ. So I always think sometimes it feels like an infidelity, not in a bad way, not to be offensive in any way, but to me it feels like almost like, well, that's where we were together. So if I was to go somewhere else, I would be leaving you.
Yeah.
But
no, I know what you're saying.
But
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
same time, then I realized, but you're so much bigger than that. You're not like my earthly relationships, you know. So, but that's where I encountered Christ, and it will always be that way. That will always be a fact.
it's like I'm born in Modesto, but I'm not, you know. Or sometimes you do stay like me in Modesto.
Well, it's hard to deny the vehicle that some of those like life changing situations.
But we were talking about
manifests
this
through.
earlier, and what was Davey saying a couple weeks ago, that our grandpa had a church in 1922, or
Yeah,
was it
it was
middle?
the 20s.
So my great grandfather started pastoring in 1922 in the Apostolic Church, and so I identify with most of the concepts or the doctrine, not concepts, but the doctrine, most of it, not all of it. But just like me and Wes were talking about earlier, and we've had this conversation many times, is I don't want to identify it because I was born there. So I even now, the last few years, I don't read it coming from that perspective. I kind of just read now like I actually want to learn for myself. I want to learn that even though I was taught this, that's correct. And then there's some issues I have problems with where I kind of just abandoned those issues and just like kind of left those. And so reading scripture now, for me, it's almost brand new. It's almost like starting from the bottom up and just letting the Lord and His Word speak to me.
Got you.
Because I want to be 100% sure of I believe that because of me and not where I was born from.
Yeah. And I think, I have friends who were raised apostolic. They're like 6th generation apostolic. And I think they would say the same thing, right? Again, I wasn't raised in it, so my perspective is a lot different, and I can't comment on people who were born in this and have a deep, deep roots in it. But what I can say is that there are a lot of benefits of a strong doctrine, but there also are a lot of things that come with that, right? And the part of that is sometimes people have difficulties venturing and finding their own path in that, right? And I think just from people that I've interacted with, I think that's the case sometimes. But no, I commend you for that journey.
I think for you guys, though, it's a little bit easier because you guys are more open-minded.
100%. No, I
under
thank
the
God.
30s, and it's like for us, we were
tough.
indoctrinated.
It was tough.
to be honest.
It was tough.
And
It was.
if you got off of the script, you're kind of looked down on.
Yeah.
But
No, it was tough for y'all.
it was tough. But I'm glad because I think in some areas they set the bar very high. That it was almost unattainable, but it was a good high. Where now people set it so low, it's like people are tripping over what they believe now. Like there's nothing to believe anymore. Like, oh, you could just believe whatever you want to believe. There's no consequences. There's nothing. And so we set the bar so low now. It's people are tripping over it.
I've been asking. Well, I haven't been asking. Well, I'm going to start asking every single guest. This guy asked John's nieces, my little cousins, this the other day. What kind of let's say Christian music do you listen to, Manny? Are you into like Bethel and Hillsong and all that, or are you like give me some Fred Hammond? You go a little bit further, and
Chanting.
So, funny you mentioned music. So with me, I love worship music, Gateway Church. I love their Spanish worship. Can't speak Spanish that well, but there's something about Spanish worship music that always hits home. So definitely, listening to like the more modern CCM worship tunes, like, Elevation is up there. But also really appreciate what like Kanye's doing with the with like
That's our boy right there.
with
That's our boy.
gospel, but and of course like gospel past is always good, but for me, like I do believe that there is some music that it would be considered secular that to me is gospel music, that makes me think of God. Right, like I think of like
Jack Johnson.
I think of like
I'm serious.
Jack
I'm
Johnson.
serious.
I don't know who that is. I'm sorry.
Banana pancakes. I'm not a big Jack Johnson fan. But
I don't know who that is. Is that
Jack
the guy
Johnson.
that sang the Curious George song?
Yeah.
We're always better to get, isn't it? He sings that. Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure. But like Tupac, right? Like Changes, Dear Mama. Like those
Funny story. Hold on.
songs.
One time, it was Mother's Day, and I not this year. I think it was last year. And I put on the microphone Tupac song, but the clean version here, Dear Mama.
Yeah.
Go ahead though.
No, like there's songs like that, like Kendrick Lamar,
Chance,
All Right.
almost all of Chance's music.
Right, like there are songs that are not Christian, quote unquote, but for me in my walk,
God's talking to you. Man.
God's talking to me, and it makes me think of God even more so than some of the Christian songs. So like I think gospel songs for me is like it's more fluid. Like yeah, I got some secular songs in my back pocket, some worship songs.
So I spoke about kind of the same thing about 2 weeks ago, where God speaks to us in our own way, and I said my uncle, he would say God would speak through him through movies. And then after church, one of the ladies, real conservative, she says, I kid you not, when I was going through all my problems and my husband just passed away, I would hear Hey There Lonely Girl, that older song.
Yeah.
And she's like, I would just cry. And I knew it was God speaking to me through that song.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing because it's us that put God in a little bottle, and we're like, no, you only could talk this way,
Yeah,
and
100%.
no other way.
100%. Wes, do you have some songs?
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, I've got some songs. But I don't know the artist too well, but there's just certain songs when I hear them, they just move me. You
Yeah.
know, So Will I don't even know the artist.
Yeah,
It's
Hillsong.
about it's it was a song about creation, the galaxy being formed and,
Billions.
and
I think, isn't
everything.
it Billions?
Is that what it is?
I think it's called like something like Billions.
I think so.
Yeah.
Everything being formed and all of creation is meant to worship you.
Yeah, yeah.
If they are, then so am I. Shane and Shane, but even like Mumford and Sons,
Yeah.
U2, Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
That very same song that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Movies too move me big time.
You guys are heretics, but go ahead.
Listen to the songs. Roll Away Your Stone.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know Christian artists by name off
Like
the top of my head like
Birthdays were the worst days. Now we drink champagne because we're
No,
thirsty. Not that one. Not Biggie.
that. No. Where were we? Movies. Les Miserables. What's that new the new Disney movie with the two brothers and they're seeking after their father because the father passed away when they were kids.
Tanya,
Wow.
man, because that's her father died when she was 10,
Yeah,
and so that movie touched her, man.
that movie crushed me.
Yeah, I couldn't watch it. I was like, I'm going to another room.
That movie crushed me.
Yeah. No, that there's some definitely good things, and I think we do limit God, and I think God is bigger than what we understand, of course, and how He speaks, and even bigger than the domination. Can't even talk. Denomination or religious sect we're a part of, you know, and I think we're the only ones, and God never intended it to separate the churches. We draw the lines.
Yeah.
We do draw the lines. He said it clearly. You know, I wish for you to be one.
Yeah.
I want for you to be one, and the only division is
It's
us.
Yeah.
Someone sent me a video of a speaker, and I couldn't get past the 10-minute mark because the guy led his story with, we're going to start laying out dividing lines. The first dividing line is this.
Oh, wow.
The second dividing line is this. The third dividing line is, I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't get past this with you. I know on the other side of that is a dangerous place too. It leads to the accepting of all that you were talking about.
Right.
So we do need to have some boundary and common understanding in matters of the faith. But there's just too much infighting, man, and it's sad. It really breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart. I look around at the way society views the Christian, and right now, we have ourselves to blame for why we're not more influential. We don't reflect well because we're busy fighting with each other over who's right and who's wrong, and they look at us like they're laughing. They need a strong contrast to the culture that exists. We need to be the alternative, the answer to the questions inside, and we're not. We're 40,000 denominations fractured in this country alone. That stuff bugs me.
How come you think there's this infighting? Like, where do you think that stems from?
I think it's the American spirit.
100. That's exactly what I think too.
It is. It's the defiant American spirit that started the whole country. It's wonderful in some regards, but it also has a twisted and contorted byproduct, which says that, you know what, I'll follow this as long as it works for me exactly, and when it doesn't line up with my personal desires, you're done. I'm gonna go make it myself.
I'm taking my ball with me.
And there's no humility in that. There's no conversion of the heart. Someone said it the other day. I read there's just no you're not growing into the body. You're not being pulled into the body. You're just creating yourself as an island. That's not what Christ wanted. But it's our rebel spirit here, and it's across all kinds of things. That same thing which has fractured our churches is what allows us to have endless identities, sexual, personal, and there's no objective truth. Well, the argument is that there is not.
It's the idea of the intersectionality of everything, right?
I hear you.
That's what I think it is, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because we'll fight each other faster than we'll fight the enemy, and who wins then? He does, of course. So,
what do you think, Manny?
No, I think it's a big question. There's a lot of infighting. I think a lot of it is, or some of it can be tied to like this desire. Like, how do you know you're blessed from God? I think pastors have it hard because, and I shared this a little bit with you, Johnny, like, how do you know you're blessed? How do you, and especially spiritually, like in the world, nice house, nice car, healthy family, cush bank account. You could take 3 vacations a year. You're blessed. But in the spiritual side, how do we determine that we're blessed? I think a lot of this is an effort to demonstrate who God favors.
That's true.
The size of a church. The the amount of listeners that we have, if we have a Christian radio station, or the viewers that we have. I think a lot of it is this, we don't know how to benchmark our spiritual growth. So the only way that we can benchmark is we kind of take it into our own hands and we say, this and that determine my spirituality and my spiritual maturity. Therefore, that becomes the benchmark by which I view all others. So I think that has a lot to do. And it goes to your point, right? That like there is this dividing lines that get put out because it becomes competitive then, right? It becomes competitive. I think T.D. Jakes said it very well. He was talking to a pastor, and the pastor said, we're going to win this city for the Lord. Our church is going to go out and we're going to win this entire city for God. And T.D. Jakes humbly told the pastor, where are you going to put them all when you win them? Right? Save some for the other guys, right? Like, they're good too. So yeah, I think
that's true about being blessed, because it doesn't, you could have a big church, which in turn could be just a big crowd.
Exactly.
And I know some pastors that pastored some small churches, and I believe for some pastors that pastor small churches, there's some that are lazy, and they don't put in the work. But there's some pastors that for 40, 50 years will pastor the same 25, and they give their life to the work of Christ, and that's a noble thing. And so only God could be like, okay, knows the intent of the man's heart and what he's actually putting into his ministry 100%. To say, oh, that's blessed. You know, that guy's just being lazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard. There's like no measuring stick to say
There isn't.
that guy's blessed. The only thing I could think of would be, what are his fruits personally? You know, not what are his fruits as far as ministry wise, you know, but personally, what are his fruits? Does he show the fruits of the Spirit? And if he's showing the fruits of the Spirit and that's coming out of him, not the ministry, but him, then he's a blessed man. And if it's coming out of him and then also the church, then you might be like, okay, that's probably a blessed church.
Most definitely. No, I agree. It's far too easy to, you know, or let me take a step back. If there's one thing that I've learned, and maybe y'all have the same understanding too, is like that God does not value, for the most part, like the way that we view certain things here on earth. Like, and his ways are so much higher than ours.
Right.
And it would be a lack of faith, so to speak, for us to think, you know, being a blessed pastor, being a blessed person is based on the accumulation of things.
No, for sure.
Right? Like, God doesn't care about those things, right? In the Bible, it says, sell it all and give it to the poor, right? That's what he told the rich young ruler. So
He's like, nah, I'm good. I'll walk away.
Right. So I think, you know, I think that's one of the biggest things personally that I am trying to wrap my head around. And I think, especially living in America, right, where we're kind of ingrained that, you know, we need to accumulate things to be successful, or we need to accumulate like a certain status to be successful. Like, God doesn't care about those things. I think he cares about what the process by which you got that, more than you having $1 million, right? Like, what did you do to get that, and how are you going to be a steward of it? I think that's what he cares about more, right? In my mind.
No, that's true, because just even looking at leadership, leadership isn't the same as when we were younger. It's totally different, and there's some, like my old pastor, Pastor Gary, like you couldn't even look him in the eye. Like he was like, you know, he had such a presence about him, and he's a man of God, you know, and it's you don't find very many of those, especially in our generation, you know, like the 30s and the 40-year-olds, and because of that, and I might be wrong, but there's only a few people where I'll be like, that man, I will call him pastor for the rest, and he's not even my pastor. You know, there's a few pastors that know every time I address them, they're pastors, and it's the level of integrity that certain men carry. I think it's beautiful, and those are just men of integrity that I believe that just are blessed from God because of their walk and how they carry themselves, and it's all business. You know, you don't see them coming on Sunday with a fur coat, you know, and a Kango
Gucci
hat
shoes.
and Gucci shoes, and you know, it's they're men of integrity, and they take their walk serious, and not just their walk, they take who they're shepherding serious, you know.
No, definitely.
Because there's some mean guys out there. And like, how are you a pastor and you're mean? Or how are you a pastor and you can't have love in your heart, or you don't hang out with the flock, or, you know, just certain attributes that you're asking your congregation to live a certain way, but somehow we're above that.
Yeah.
You know?
So I thank God I'm not.
Kind of went
called
too
to be
far
a
off of that.
pastor.
God. Manny's like, well.
No. I know. Like, for me, pastorship is one of the hardest jobs, because you don't know. It's hard to tell how well you're doing, right? Because it's all about faith, right? And you don't see reward until you get to heaven. So if I work a job, 2 weeks I know I'm gonna get paid, right? So it's a tough job.
Well, there's a lot of pastors that get paid pretty well. And that might be the problem too. No, my cousin, he's getting a church, and he's from a different denomination, and he was telling me how much he was going to get paid. I was like, wow. And in their denomination, their pastors get 40% of their tithes and offering every Sunday. And I'm like, that's a lot of money, especially if you have more than a couple hundred, you know? And their church, or the church he pastors, they brought in a few million.
Oh, wow.
And the lead pastor says, there's a certain point where you take the 40, like it would be unethical to take 40% off of all these millions. But I'm just thinking like 40%, just if you do it for full time, just kind of pay your house payment, have a car and live, and
Totally.
Don't have to live too crazy.
I know, seriously, you don't got to get
especially
that,
off of the back
Huracan.
of people's money. It for here. I know I used to do the offering, and so there's a lot of people here that are on fixed incomes. They're older people. And faithfully, they'll give their $66 that they make a month, or from their tithes. That's their offering. And for me, I'm like, I can't spend that in a way where it's not, for me, just blowing that money. I have to be a good steward of that money, because that's her tithes and offering that she's giving to the Lord. And for me, being a leader, not being a good steward of that money, I don't know how people could do that. It's
crazy.
Something.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's when I was at Berkeley, I studied prosperity gospel preachers. I wrote 2 articles on them, and they're an interesting bunch. And for me, that's why I appreciate that perspective, because to be a man of God and be a religious leader, it's a big responsibility, and you should be taken care of, but there has to be limits, right?
Yeah,
and you have to honor those that are giving, because they're giving by faith, and sometimes they don't have, they're going home trying to make it another week, right? But by faith they gave. So yeah, it's definitely.
He goes, there needs to be limits on those pastors. Just like there needs to be limits on those billionaires out there. He's like, Big Corp, I'm coming for all of you.
I'm calling people out right
just
now.
Kidding.
Yeah.
But we have about 2 more minutes.
We got about 2 more minutes?
Yeah.
All right. Man, I don't debate if I'm going to ask you this question on air or off.
We'll probably have to ask him questions later.
I'll probably have to ask him questions later. Is there anything you want to end with, Manny, that you want to, send people to, resources or anything that you do? Because I know that you're involved in some other stuff.
No, just if you're a person who believes in the Lord, just keep fighting. This is a very difficult time right now, but there is definitely a fruit. I encourage you to read Ezekiel 1-12. That through the situation, God will promise fruit that brings healing and prosperity. So stay in faith, keep trusting in God, and there will be an end date of this current situation that we're in, and there are brighter days ahead.
And then plug whatever, because you have a magazine as well.
Yeah,
too.
So the Apostolic Magazine. If you're interested, we talk about current topics. We talk about theological topics. We're mainly on Instagram at the Apomag, TheApomag. Also at the Apomag on Facebook. You can follow us on our website too, theapomag.com.
Would I still be able to find your MySpace handle?
I deleted my MySpace years ago. There was a couple photos that were on not
Some Latino heat.
Latino heat right there.
Latino heat.
I always remember that handle.
R.I.P. Eddie Guerrero. But
that's right. That guy was a beast.
I like how you keep it. You want to know who also brings that up? Everybody else your age also brings that up.
I don't know why. Ever since I seen that's always stuck
Latino
with me.
heat.
The
Dude,
Latino
it's
heat.
funny when you say Eddie Guerrero because at the end of his career, you guys have the same hair a little bit too.
Yeah, we
You guys
have
the same haircut, though.
R.I.P. Eddie.
All
People
right.
your age after you get a backhanded comment right there, but go ahead.
All right, everybody. Just to end this up, we would really appreciate if you guys, start engaging with these if you're still listening. So go ahead and leave any type of questions or any topics, I guess, in the comments that you guys would want to hear us talk about, or I don't know, any thing that you disagreed with or you agreed with. Just, feel free to put your thoughts in the comments, and then also like and subscribe and share this with a friend. I know we say that every single time. We see you guys watching, but I don't see a lot of shares going out. So do us a favor and share it with somebody. But then other than that, you guys have anything else to say?
Thank you, Manny. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity. It's a pleasure to meet y'all. Meet you, Wes, and hang out with y'all again.
Yeah, you'll probably go viral, but
Yeah.
Manny's going viral today.
All right, everybody. Like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time.